Dwyane Wade and LeBron James just played their final game against each other. These two NBA legends had some amazing head-to-head performances in the regular season, but unfortunately we can never see them face off in a playoff series. What makes it even more disappointing is the fact that there were numerous instances where we were so close to seeing them match up. So let's talk about them. Number 1. 2005 First Round. Dwyane Wade and LeBron James were both very good players very early on in their careers. Neither one of them were like Giannis, for example, who took a few years before he reached the level he's at. Wade and LeBron were both superstar level players in their sophomore seasons. However, Wade got something in his second season that the Cavs could not get LeBron in 7 years. Help. And this help came in the form of Shaquille O'Neal, and while Shaq wasn't in his prime, he was still very good and even finished second in MVP voting in 2005. And with the addition of Shaq, the improvement of D-Wade, the Heat instantly vaulted into a championship caliber team, winning 59 games in the regular season and claimed the first seed in the East. LeBron's Cavs, on the other hand, after a pretty good start to the season, eventually regressed to being about a 500 team and only won 42 games, thus missing the playoffs. So you might be wondering how LeBron and Wade almost met in 2005, if only one of them even made the playoffs that year. Well, if you were to look at the standings from that season, you would see that the 8th seeded team had an identical record to the Cleveland Cavaliers. New Jersey made the playoffs because they held the tiebreaker with Cleveland. It's a shame too, because one of the 3 games the Nets won against Cleveland was decided by only 2 points. And LeBron made a lot of mistakes down the stretch of that game. In the final 2 minutes, he got called for 2 travels, drew a technical foul, missed a free throw, and missed a potential game-winning shot. And he also didn't stick with his man Richard Jefferson on this inbound play.
It's going to make the pass by Smith a lot more difficult. Looking for the win, lob, catch, and layup at the buzzer. It's over. Oh, what a play off the inbounds.
Which won the game for New Jersey, after Lucius Harris's game-winning 3-point attempt clanked off the rim. Of course, if the Cavs had won this game, they would have had 43 wins and the Nets would have had 41 wins, so they wouldn't have needed a tiebreaker anyway. The Cavs would have had an identical record to the 76ers, but the Sixers beat the Cavs all 3 times they played, so the Sixers still would have had the 7th seed, Cleveland would have had the 8th seed, and met Miami in the first round, and we could have gotten to see Wade versus LeBron in their second seasons. Another thing worth mentioning here is the fact that the Cavs won their last game of the regular season. So in order to maintain their playoff position, the Nets also had to win their last game, which they did, versus the Boston Celtics. The only reason I am bringing this up is because the Celtics had a 19-point lead in that game, and if they didn't blow it, Cavs make the playoffs, and we get to see Wade versus LeBron in their sophomore seasons. But that didn't happen. Obviously, if the Cavs had made the playoffs that year, they would have been crushed because the Heat were a championship caliber team while the Cavs were fairly average. But it still would have been nice to see. Number 2. 2006 Conference Finals. In 2006, the Cavaliers were a 50-win team and had no problem making the playoffs. The Miami Heat, as you probably already know, won the title that year, so they were still pretty good. If the Heat and Cavs had met in the playoffs that year, it would have been a great series. Miami still wins though because they were the better team, but it would have been a much more evenly matched series than the previous potential matchup, and more so than any of the future matchups I'll get to. But it didn't happen. LeBron's Cavs ran into the 64-win Detroit Pistons in the second round, and they actually almost won that series. After the first 5 games, the Cavs were up 3-2, but they lost Game 6, 84-82. Damn, you were that close. And if you were to watch the final few minutes of that game, you would see that the Cavs were so close to winning it. Like, LeBron made all his clutch free throws, which given his recent history is pretty incredible. If Cleveland had just gotten one of a couple of defensive rebounds, they could have had a chance to win the game. Or maybe if their coach had called timeout after this play here, I don't know why he didn't. There was definitely not enough time left to be going in transition, and plus they needed a three-pointer. But anyways, the Cavs went on to get blown out in Game 7. The Pistons really clamped down on them in this game. Cleveland only scored 61 points on 31% shooting. As a side note, LeBron scored 27 of those 61 points, by the way. He almost scored half their damn points. Another thing worth noting here is the fact that the only reason Cleveland and Detroit met in the second round is because the winner of the 1-8 matchup faces the winner of the 4-5 matchup in the second round. But Cleveland wasn't really a fourth seed. They had the third best record in the East, but because of the NBA's dumb division rule, New Jersey got the third seed while Cleveland had the fourth seed. If it wasn't for that rule, Miami and Cleveland could have met in the second round. Number 3, 2009 Semifinals. By the year 2009, the script had flipped and LeBron was on the contending team while Wade's team was fairly average. Shaq was traded and the contending Miami Heat teams had fallen apart. While LeBron, on the other hand, was able to lead Cleveland to a league-best 66 wins. These two teams could have possibly met in the second round, but Miami unfortunately lost a 7-game series versus Atlanta in the first round. None of the games were close. In fact, each game of the series was decided by 10 points or more, so it's not like Miami lost a heartbreaking close game the same way Cleveland did in 2006, but it was still a 7-game series, so it was worth mentioning here anyway. Plus, 2009 Wade versus LeBron would have been amazing to see. During that season, everybody was talking about LeBron versus Kobe, but LeBron versus Wade would have been just as good. LeBron at the time looked like he was at his absolute peak, and Wade actually was at his absolute peak. I mean, just look at these stats. Number 4, 2015 first round. In 2015, in a very similar story to 2005, the Heat and Cavs almost met in the playoffs, but unfortunately, one of the two teams missed the playoffs entirely. The only difference this time is Miami was the team that missed the playoffs, and they would have had to have won 3 more games so they can be the 7th seed because Cleveland was the 2nd seed. The Heat winning 3 more games isn't really that crazy because, if I remember correctly, I think Miami was hovering around the 7th seed for a decent stretch of the season. But then they started to lose a lot of games towards the end of the year and missed the playoffs entirely. And some of those were close losses too. Wade and LeBron matching up in 2015 wouldn't have been as sweet because neither one of them were in their primes by that point. Especially Wade, who had declined quite a bit. But still, it would have been nice to see, especially since this was the first season after LeBron had left Miami. Number 5, 2016 Conference Finals. And the final time we were really close to seeing a Wade versus LeBron playoff series was in the 2016 Conference Finals. The Miami Heat lost a 7-game series versus the Toronto Raptors in the second round. And while the Heat were blown out in Game 7, they were close to and really should have won Game 2 of that series. If the Heat go up 2-0, winning both games in Toronto, I guarantee you they go on to win that series.
So the Heat change defensive assignments. Wade on Lowry with 10 on the shot clock. Patterson sets the screen. Wade fights over it. Great contest, but Lowry comes up extra large. That's pretty good defense from Dwyane Wade. Lowry decides to go away from this.
But they didn't, and once again, a LeBron versus Wade playoff series just narrowly escaped us. And all this brings us to 2018. Dwyane Wade is in the middle of his last season, just played his last game versus LeBron. God damn that airplane in the background. Basically, any chance of these two finally meeting in a playoff series is zero, unless the Heat and Lakers by some miracle meet in the finals. But that is totally not going to happen. I shouldn't even entertain the idea. Anyways, I got nothing else to say, so have a good day. If you are feeling nostalgic about the LeBron Wade era in Miami, you can watch some highlights of the two by clicking the playlist on the right. Or if you're curious as to whether or not LeBron can break Kareem's all-time scoring record, you can click the video on the left.